At one point, so Mobius and Loki, they go into this little room, and Mobius is explaining to Loki pretty much who he really is, right? Like
Yeah.
if Loki was somehow unaware of himself, he tells him, you kind of go around causing chaos. That's your purpose. Your actual purpose is to cause chaos, to cause mischief, and also to elevate people to be their better self. It's like, that's kind of why you exist.
He says something, I don't think he says this exactly, but he essentially says, like, you're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like, you always make everyone else better, but you never achieve your goal.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a point where Loki gets a hold of a time pad, his own time pad, I guess, and he's able to kind of escape. This is when he runs into the receptions with the Infinity Stones, and at one point he just goes back to the room that him and Mobius were in, and he starts to look at his life events. So he sees his mother dying, which brings some great sadness because he was the cause of that, and then he sees his father dying, and then last but not least, he sees the moment where he died to Thanos. And I don't know why, but when I watched this scene, I actually got sad too, and it's probably because the actor, like Tom, he does a really good job of looking sad in the moment. It's like he's about to cry.
Yeah.
As Thanos is saying, "You won't escape death this time," and he's about to snap his neck, he's watching it and he's starting to tear up as he's seeing it. And I don't know, something about him watching like his mom and his dad die, and then watching himself die. And he's obviously a narcissist, so his death was the one that was the biggest shock to him. But it really rubs him the wrong way watching these events, and he starts to tear up. And this is a guy who typically acts like he's unbothered by everything. It's part of his character. Almost nothing gets to him outside of like disrespect, of course, and then he always deals with that. In this case, he's powerless, and he's also annoyed that like this is all I amounted to.
What's really interesting about it is they took kind of a risk, but I think it paid off in that. So that, in the original timeline that we all watched in Endgame, or not even before Endgame, Loki dies, right? So when they made this Loki show, in a way, they took a Loki from 2012 before all of the character development of all of these movies. So they needed to find a way to speed run his character development. Because they're taking an undeveloped Loki. And so they took, and I think they did a really well job of essentially speed running his character development. He doesn't end up exactly the same, but they show him all these things, and it allows him to grow as a character fairly quick in episode 1. But then, that the rest of the series, he grows even more, and has arguably more development than the other Loki had throughout all of the movies. Like, just what
this Loki definitely turns out different by the end, and we'll definitely get to that too because. Yeah, I agree with you though. This Loki definitely does grow in a very different way than the Loki who's from, whatever year Endgame takes place in, where he gets killed in Infinity War and all that stuff, right? So yeah, Loki, he's watching these events, he gets sad, and at some point him and Mobius reconnect, and he's given his jacket, his TVA jacket, he's like not given a real position. I forget what his jacket says on the back of it, but it's a cool jacket. He's like an assistant, essentially.
It basically says like temp or something. Yeah.
Yes, he's basically a temp. So he goes to the library. They have this library that literally holds a record of everything that's ever happened. And there's this little orange clock creature thing, digital creature that's called Miss Minutes. Yes.
Miss Minutes, yo.
Miss Minutes comes and she explains what a Nexus event is. She explains how timelines work and what happens when you deviate from timelines and why the TVA exists in the first place and all of this stuff. Just to fill you in. So I'm sure if you guys watch the show, you already know all of that. But then it gets to a point where Loki realizes that the place that the other Loki is probably hiding in is doomsday scenarios. And this is like a big part of the show because a doomsday scenario is a scenario where it has to be kind of quick. Mobius explains that it has to be sudden. No survivors, right? Like no one survives it. It's sudden and it has to be natural. Right? Like something that's just like a unnatural. So a tsunami, for example, a tsunami hits, some country, wipes it out. The people couldn't really expect it, I guess, because the word sudden was used by Mobius for whatever reason. And if you built to that type of thing, let's say the TVA goes to that event, or if anyone went to that event and they did anything, it wouldn't matter because everyone's going to die anyway. So
you can't deviate time. You can't create a branch in time because everything's going to, if meteors are going to hit the planet Earth, it doesn't really matter what the fuck I do if I do or don't walk my dog. Like,
yes. So dead. Loki wants to test this. So him and Mobius go to Pompeii, and there is a volcano about to explode, right? And as it's about to explode, Loki tests the theory by saying, "Hey, I'm from the future." He's jumping up and down. Also, they're dressed like people from our time. and the people in Pompeii are fucking, wearing like rags essentially. And he's jumping up and down, but people are screaming and they're running because the fucking volcano is going off and they're all about to die. And he's talking about being from the future and stuff, but no one pays him any mind. And he's like, see, it works. So that's like the confirmation that doomsday scenarios are a place that the other Loki could go to. They could do whatever they want and there's no consequence and you guys can't track them because it wouldn't trigger a Nexus event. There's no Nexus event for me going to this place and staying. Like if I go, 24 hours before Pompeii happens, and I start doing whatever I want, like you guys can't track me because this place is getting wiped out no matter what.
Yeah,
now, if I saved someone, if I grabbed a human from there and took them away, and I was like, I don't want you to die. I saved a child. Maybe I saw a baby about to be killed, and I'm like, you know what? I can't bear to see this. That will cause it to happen. But if you just go there and everyone dies the same way, it doesn't matter.
If you went there with a machine gun and killed 30 people the day before, like, okay.
Yeah, like it doesn't matter. So they kind of established that that's how doomsday scenarios work with the sacred timeline. They don't really have an effect.
It's a pretty cool workaround. When you have a show about time and time travel and like being able to track everything that happens through time, that is something that's really cool and interesting where like if you want to hide from people that can track time, you hide in these places where like time basically doesn't matter because time for everyone there ends. Like it's a really cool workaround.
Yeah, it is actually. It's not, I always say when anything decides to use time as a mechanic in any show or any movie, it can go terribly wrong. And we've seen it go terribly wrong so many times. Some genres, some shows, some movies, they actually get it right, and some do not. I think that this show does a pretty decent job at trying to explain away a lot of the questions that people would have. Obviously, there are always going to be plot holes that people can point to. Why didn't they just do this? Why didn't this happen? Etc. But they do try their best to explain it away. And as long as you don't try to make the show unfun for yourself, I think that you will enjoy it. Like if you don't go trying to blatantly look for plot holes, because I know that that's some people's mission, right? Is like, I want to expose why this is a bad show. And as long as that's not your goal, you're watching this, I think that they do a decent job at explaining how the fuck is this Loki hiding.
I also think when you have that mindset, you just end up nitpicking things that may not even be plot holes. Like, I remember I saw back when I first saw this, I saw a video, forgive me, I don't remember who made the video, but somebody like absolutely infuriated at the way the Infinity Stones worked and etc. Like we were talking about earlier. Yeah. But it's just like, if you're hell-bent on deciding that like this is the way it's supposed to be and that it doesn't make sense and it's a plot hole that Loki used them this way, then like everything's a plot hole for you. You know what I mean? Like
like, and don't get me wrong, some plot holes are worse than others, and they're so glaringly bad that you can't, it's like, I can't overlook this. This is just a bad one. But some of them are like, okay, I just accept that this is how it is. For example, I always bring up in Infinity War, Thanos explains what his mission is, and the first question that comes to mind, somebody like me who obviously questions everything, is why don't you just create double the resources? Right? You're wiping out half the population. Why don't you just create more resources, or not even double, just create more resources so that this is not an issue? But that poses different problems, and I'm assuming Thanos has thought about that at some point because Thanos is a genius. And it's just, you just have to accept that his solution is cutting the population in half. That's the fuck what he wants to do. That's what Thanos has decided he wants to do. And Thanos is in his right state of mind. There's no Darkhold making him do this. This is his will. His will is, I want to kill half of everything that lives. So that's what he wants to do. He's hell-bent on doing specifically that. They never told us that the Infinity Stones can't create more resources. They never bring it up. They're like, fuck it. This is what we want our villain to do, and this is what our villain is going to do. And he accomplishes that. And I love Thanos. I love him. So it's like, all right, I accept. Like, I literally accept the fact that he doesn't do the obvious, why don't you just create more resources? And he's just like, no. So yeah, as long as you don't go looking for, but then what about all of these things that happen? They all mean nothing now, because I know a lot of videos around on YouTube and stuff where they're like, everything that ever happened is invalidated now. Every moment that you've ever liked in every Marvel movie doesn't matter because it was all predetermined. Every time Tony Stark saved someone, where he flew this plane or this bomb into space and risked his life for it.
See, the thing is, this is interesting though, right? Because it depends. Once again, it depends on how you look at it, and it depends on whether or not you want to ruin things for yourself or whether or not you want to be happy, whatever, right? Because you could argue, right? If, let's say, everything is written, every absolute thing is written and predetermined. However, to some degree, it's like there's a reason why certain people were given certain roles. There's a reason why Tony Stark is the one that will sacrifice himself and not Osama bin Laden. Like, you know, so like if Tony Stark is the one that ends up doing all these things, you can still appreciate all those things because in his like he is the kind of person that would have wanted like it. To me, it seems more so. It's less that like Kang or whoever wants to write every little thing that happens. It's more so he's keeping everybody in line. So we'll take Tony Stark and who he is, and he'll keep him being himself, but on a path that doesn't cause an event. You know what I mean?
Yes. So you're right about that too. And the show actually does go into that. The other Lokis, when we meet them in episode 5, there's an old Loki, and he's actually played by a famous actor too. I forget his name.
Yeah.
But there's an older Loki. He's the oldest one there. There's a kid. There's a Black Loki. I'm just gonna call him Black Loki. And there's a crocodile called Croaky. So there's the older Loki, and he explains that at one point he went to some desolate place and he ruled there. And then he decided that he was bored and wanted to see his family again. And when he tried to come back, the TVA got him.
Yeah.
So he deviated from the Loki characteristics, right? Like he did something that just wasn't in Loki's character, and he started to care about people. And this is shown again when Loki, the two Lokis, you know, Loki's is a narcissist. He fell in love with himself. When the two Lokis touch, right, and they start to have that moment where they kind of fall in love, it creates a Nexus event as well. So anytime Loki starts to care about people, this happens. Like it's a Nexus event in itself for Loki to care about people, and that it's kind of sad, but that's his role, right? Like that's according to Kang and the Sacred Timeline. That's your role. Your role is that if you care about anyone, you are deviating from who you're supposed to play, like the role you're supposed to play.
Yep. And so, I think some people are probably some people are given more leeway than others. But Loki obviously is given a lot less leeway. I guess you brought it up. We can talk about it because this is another contentious thing. But I think it's interesting. The whole idea of Loki falling in love with himself, falling in love with another Loki. I thought it was really cool because it does two things at the same time. It shows
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you see it coming? Because I can see that coming a mile. Once they reveal Sylvie, I said these two. I don't know. I was like, I hope they don't have a sex scene because that's a bit much. But I was like, these two are for sure gonna somehow end up together.
They made it. It didn't feel like they hit it. You know what I mean? Like it felt like as soon as it was revealed, it was like they started flirting right away. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they started talking about like people they dated and how relationships did. It's like, all right, well,
yes.
Like it got like they did not bury the lead at all. But my point. But I think it's really interesting to have Loki fall in love with himself from another timeline because first it does two things. One, shows how absolutely like he's still an absolute narcissist because he's still falling in love with himself or in love with himself. But it also simultaneously creates a paradox because he is in love with someone else. Regardless of the fact that it is still a Loki from another timeline, it is still not it's not him. It is a different entity. And at the end of the day, Loki always puts his actual self number one. So the fact that he's in love with another person, even if it is another Loki, it shows that caring and that loving, it's like a not narcissistic trait while still being super narcissistic. And
because it's you from a different universe, but also not completely you because the anatomy of a woman for one, she's lived a completely different life than he has. Right, she's been on the run since she was a little girl.
Yep. So it's just a really cool paradox, and I really enjoyed it. I know there's a lot of people that don't like that and they think it's weird. There's also people that think it's like wrong because it's like self-incest, but I want everybody the real like that's not
just relax.
It's not real.
It doesn't exist.
It's not real.
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah,
it just doesn't fucking exist. Like, so calm down.
Like we can't make self-incest illegal. Like that doesn't. It's not.
It's just
real.
not real. This is fantasy. So it's and there are two consenting adults, as I always say. I don't give a fuck what they do. They're two consenting adults. Hey guys, if you like this clip, we have full video versions of our podcast episodes available on the IMNerd Patreon, as well as exclusive content.
If you'd like to listen to our full podcast episodes or find us on any other social media platforms, you can do so by clicking the link tree below.